Our lesson today is to be able to write percents as fractions with a denominator of 100 and to write fractions as percents. The key ideas here is that a percent is a part to a whole ratio where the whole is 100. So you can write a percent as a fraction with a denominator of 100. The word percent means out of 100. So if I take a look at an example of 60%, 60% means 60 out of 100. So I can write 60% as a fraction over 100. All right. Our first few examples here. All right, let's see what we got. If I want to write 35% as a fraction in simplest form, I first start by writing the percent as a ratio with a denominator of 100. So 35% would be written as 35 out of 100, right? Because the word percent means out of 100. And then we'd want to simplify that fraction. I see that 35 and 100 and in 5 and 0. So to simplify, I can divide by 5 over 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. Right? So 35% as a fraction in simplest form would be 7 over 20. And remember, we recognize a fraction is in simplest form because the greatest common factor of the numerator and the denominator is 1. All right. Let's take a look at the second example. Example B. If I want to write 100% as a fraction in simplest form, I take the percent and write it over 100, right? Because the percent means out of 100. So 100 over 100 as a fraction in simplest form, we can divide by 100 over 100 and we get 1 over 1 as a fraction in simplest form. Example C, 174%. See or notice that 174% is more than 100%. So as a fraction or a mixed number in simplest form, right, it's going to be greater than 1. Because if 100% is equivalent to 1, anything more than 100% will be more than 1. But the same process, same rules apply. We write the percent as a ratio over 100. So I take the percent, 174, and write it as a ratio over 100. And then I want to simplify this. Well, first I'm going to simplify this by dividing 100 into 174. And 100 goes into 174 one time with 74 left over out of 100. So that would be my first step, to write it as a mixed number. And then I want to simplify 74 over 100. Well, I see that they're both even, or 74 and 100 are both even, so I can divide by 2 over 2. So that's going to be 1 and, let's see, half of 74 would be what, 37? And half of 100 would be 50. So 1 and 37 over 50 would be a fraction or mixed number in simplest form. Okay, let's try these three examples. 5%, I start by writing 5 over 100. We take the percent, put it over 100. I can simplify that fraction by dividing by 5 over 5 because they end in 5 and 0. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 5% is the same as 5 out of 100, and 5 out of 100 is the same as 1 over 20. Let's try the next example. 168%. I write the percent as a ratio over 100. That's my first step. So that's going to be 168 over 100. And then I want to divide 100 into 168. 100 goes into 168 one time with 68 left over 100. And then I want to simplify 68 over 100. Well, I can, looks like I can divide 68 by 2 over 2. So that's going to be 1 and 34 over 50. But I can still simplify 34 over 50 by 2. So that's going to be 1 and 17 over 25. So 168% is the same as 168 over 100, which is the same as 1 in 68 over 100, which is the same as 1 in 34 over 50, which is the same or equivalent to 1 in 17 over 25. Let's try example 3. 36%. I write the percent as a ratio over 100. So I write 36 over 100. I want to simplify by dividing by, what can we divide by? 4 over 4. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So 9 over 25 is the same as 36%. And finally, 83%. I take the percent and write it as a ratio over 100. So that's going to be 83 over 100. And can I simplify 83 over 100? I don't believe I can. I believe that 83 over 100 would be a fraction in simplest form. So 83% as a fraction would be 83 over 100. Now we want to try writing fractions as percents. And if possible, we can write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. That would be the easiest way to change a fraction to a percent. Now that's not always possible, but for sixth graders, very often that will be possible. So let's do a few of those where we can make equivalent fractions with a denominator of 100. If I start with 3 over 50, and I want to write 3 over 50 as a percent, I want to write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, because the word percent means out of 100. Well, in order to go from 50 to 100, we had to multiply by 2 in the denominator. To keep the ratios equivalent, I'd have to multiply by the same factor in the numerator, so 3 times 2 would be 6. So 3 out of 50 as a percent is 6 out of 100, which is 6%. Alright, let's try another example. 9 out of 12. A drought affects 9 out of 12 Midwestern states. What percent of the Midwestern states are affected by the drought? Well, first we start with the fraction 9 out of 12. And I would like to make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. But I can't. Right? There's no direct way, no direct factor that I could use, no whole number that I can multiply 12 by to get to 100. So instead of using 9 over 12, I'm going to make an equivalent fraction by simplifying. Right? What can I divide both 9 and 12 by? Well, I can divide 9 and 12 by 3. So I'm going to divide by 3 over 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 9 twelfths is the same as 3 fourths. But once I have 9 twelfths in its simplest form of 3 fourths, then I can make an equivalent ratio with a denominator of 100. 4 times 25 is 100. So to make an equivalent ratio, we'd have to multiply the numerator by the same amount. 3 times 2 is, 3 times, 25, right? Got to multiply that by 25. So 3 times 25 would be 75 out of 100. 75 out of 100 is the same as 75%. Okay, we have a few problems here, the on your own problems. Right? We'll give them a shot. Do problem 5 over here. 31 over 50. I want to make an equivalent ratio with a denominator of 100. Right. This would be times 2 to go from 50 to 100. So I multiply the numerator times 2. 31 times 2 is going to be 62. 62 over 100 is the same as 62%. Right. If I try problem 6. Problem 6, we have 7 over 25. 7 over 25, I want to make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. To go from 25 to 100, we multiply by 4. So to make an equivalent ratio, we'd have to multiply the numerator by 4. 7 times 4 gives me 28. So we're saying 7 out of 25 is the same as 28 out of 100. And 28 out of 100 is the same as 28%. Because the word percent means out of 100. Problem 7. We have 19 out of 20. Once again, I want to make an equivalent ratio with a denominator of 100. To do that, 20 times 5 is going to be 100, so I'd have to multiply that numerator by 5, and 19 times 5 is going to be 95. So 19 out of 20 is the same as 95 out of 100. 95 out of 100 is the same as 95%. All right, let's look at problem 8. Problem 8, we're given 1 and 1/2. My first step is to write the mixed number as an improper fraction. And we do that by taking the denominator, 2, multiplying it by the whole number part, and then adding the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, and the denominator stays the same. Now that the denominator is 2, and I've written it as an improper fraction, I can make an equivalent ratio with a denominator of 100. All right? 2 times 50 gives us 100, so I'd have to multiply the numerator by the same factor of 50. 3 times 50 is 150. So 1/2 is the same as 3 halves, or 3 over 2. 3 over 2 is the same as 150 out of 100. The word percent means out of 100. So 150 out of 100 is the same as 150%. So 1/2 is equivalent to 150%. All right? We have some examples here where we have some fractions that repeat, and we want to be able to write these fractions as percents. Now, these are fractions that are on the list, the fractions, decimals, and percents that I've had you memorize, but let's pretend you don't know these percent equivalents for these fractions. So what do? First step, because we're looking for a percent, I want to multiply my fraction by 100%. And when we multiply by 100%, 2 times 100% is going to give me 200% over 3. And now I want to do my long division. I want to divide 3 into 200. And when I divide 3 into 200, that's going to give me what? 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract, I get 2. Bring down the 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract, we get 2. That remainder of 2, I put over my divisor of 3, and I write that as a fraction. So 66 2/3% is the same as the fraction 2/3. All right? So when I want to write a fraction as a percent, I multiply by 100%, and then I do some long division. Let's try the next example. 5/9. I want to take 5/9, multiply that by 100%. That's going to give me 500% over 9. I want to do some long division with that, so I'm going to divide 9 into 500. 9 times 5 is 45. I'm going to subtract, it's going to give me 5, bring down the 0. 9 goes into 50 5 times again. 5 times 9 is 45. Subtract, I get 5. That remainder of 5 I put over my divisor of 9. So we wind up with 55 5/9% is the same as 5/9. All right, let's look at 8/9. First step, multiply the fraction by 100%. That's going to give me 800% over 9. I do my long division. I divide 9 into 800. 8 times 9 is 72. Subtract, I get 8. Bring down the 0. 8 times 9 is 72. subtract, I get 8. That remainder of 8, I put over my divisor of 9, and we get 8/9 is the same as 88 and 8/9%. 5/6, I want to write that as a percent. First step, multiply by 100%. That's going to give me 500%. Make that 0 a little better. 500% over 6, my long division. 6 into 500. That's going to give me what? 6 goes into 50 8 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract, we get 2. Bring down the 0. 6 goes into 20 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. Subtract, we get 2. My remainder of 2, I put over my divisor of 6. But we could simplify that fraction of 2/6 to 1/3. So we wound up with 83 and 1/3% is the equivalent to the fraction 5/6. So just remember those steps when we want to write a fraction. As a percent, I take the fraction and multiply by 100%. I do some long division. My remainder, I put over my divisor. And we use that process when we can't make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. All right? If we can make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, that's a little bit easier. But if we can't, because there are going to be plenty of fractions where we can't make that equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, we use this process. Okay, last group of problems. I like to call these percent questions. Right? 5 is what percent of 8? All right. We like to take a look at this and write an equation. Right? 5 is what percent of 8? I write the equation. 5 is an equal sign. What percent translates to my variable? The word of is multiply. And then we have an 8. To solve this equation for n, we do the inverse operation of this multiplication here, which is division. So we want to divide both sides of the equation by 8. On the right side of the equation, the 8 in the numerator cancels the 8 in the denominator. And n is going to be equal to 5 out of 8. Well, 5 out of 8, I want to now use the same process we just did above. I want to multiply by 100% because I'm trying to find the percent. I multiply by 100%, that's going to give me 500% over 8. Then I do my long division. I want to divide 8 into 500. That's going to give me what? 8 goes into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract, I get 2. Bring down the 0. 8 goes into 20 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract, I get 4. My remainder of 4, I put over my divisor of 8. But 4/8 is a fraction that I can simplify. 4 over 8 simplifies to 1 over 2. So we get 62 and 1/2% is equivalent to 5/8. 5 is what percent of 8? 5 is 62.5% of 8. Let's try example 2. Right? I want to first write an equation from my percent question. Each word or each part of this percent question translates into some part of the equation. This becomes 17. Is will always be my equal sign. The phrase what percent is my variable. The word of is always multiplication. And then we have the number 40. To solve this equation for the variable n, I want to do the inverse operation of this multiplication. Right, but I have to do that on both sides of the equation. So I'm going to divide by 40 on both sides of the equation. On the right side of the equation, 40 in the numerator cancels 40 in the denominator, and I'm left with 1n. 1n is equal to 17 out of 40. So if I want to find the percent, right, I have to find 17 over 40. So that's where we have to do that long division process. 17 out of 40 times 100%, because I want to change this fraction 17 out of 40 to a percent. This winds up being 1700% over 40. So now we have to do long division with the 2-digit divisor. right? So that's going to be 40 is my divisor, 1700 is my dividend. 40 goes into 1700 what? 4 times. 4 times 40 is 160. Subtract, I get 10. Bring down the 0. 40 goes into 100 2 times. 2 times 40 is 80. Subtract, I get 20. My remainder of 20, I put over my divisor of 40. But 20 over 40 would simplify to 1/2. So 17 out of 40 is going to be 42 and 1/2%. All right, and our last problem, scroll down. 15 is what percent of 16? I like to write my equation first. So that's going to be 15. Let's redo that. It's a little sloppy. All right, that's going to be, let's try that again. That's going to be 15. Is your equal sign. The phrase what percent, that's your variable. The word of is multiply. And then I have my 16. To solve that one-step equation, I want to do the inverse operation of this multiplication, and the inverse operation of multiplication would be division, but whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other side. So I want to divide both sides of this equation by 16. 16's cancel on the right side of the equation. 16 in the numerator, 16 in the denominator becomes 1. And I write 1n just like that. So n is going to be equal to 15 sixteenths. Well, we're trying to find the percent, so I have to take that fraction and write it as a percent. So this becomes 15 over 16 times 100%. 15 times 100 is going to be 1500. So that's going to be 1500 over 16. I want to do some long division now, where we're dividing 16 into 1500. Well, 16 doesn't go into 15, but 16 into 150. I'm going to think that goes 9 times, because 16 times 10 would be 160. So it's probably going to be 9. 9 times 6 is 54. Put down the 4. Carry the 5. 9 times 1 is 9, and 5 is 14. I subtract, I get 6, bring down the 0. 16 goes into 60. I think that's 3 times. 3 times 16 is 48. Subtract, I get 12. Right? That remainder of 12 we put over our divisor of 16. So we get 93 and 12 sixteenths. But 12 over 16 can simplify. If you divide by 4 over 4, that's going to give you 93 and 3/4%. All right, that's the end of our lesson, where we're changing fractions to percents, and hopefully that was helpful.